Listen, this is to be expected. If Moscow didn't think that this was going to happen, this would have been wishful thinking and awful planning. But Mike, look, I don't think that Sweden and Finland are the real issue here. The Russians may mind that, but I doubt they're going to move against them. The real issue is Ukraine, and that's the country that's not being given NATO membership, although it was being integrated into the Western security sphere of influence. And I think that when the dust settles and we read about this conflict 10, 20 years down the road, I think one of the big questions that IR theorists and historians will be asking is how could the West have made such a misjudgment of both pulling Ukraine into its sphere of influence and yet not giving it any of the guarantees that Article 5 of NATO offers. We can ask the same question about the EU. I know we're talking about the war here today, but listen, there's another track that's very important here. President Zelensky just received the famous file with the questionnaire from Ursula von der Leyen, who was in Kiev. The Ukrainians they really want to be in the EU. I would say that that's much more important for Ukraine than being a member of NATO in the long run. But how long this process is going to take is an open question. We spoke about the Russian economy and the devastation that it's experiencing, but that pales in comparison to what Ukraine is experiencing now, especially keeping in mind that it went to the war as the poorest country in Europe. And whether its path to the EU is going to take 20, 30 years like Turkey's is still taking. Look, this is an open question, but that's really going to be the thing to watch as the conflict will come to an end, which, of course, inevitably it does, and I hope sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Michael, let me ask you about this, because Russia is Finland's third biggest trading partner, right after Sweden and Germany. Polling in recent years had shown that most Finns, they didn't want to join NATO. Most recent poll, though, a majority of Finns say they do want to join NATO. There's a saying, when Russians look across the border, they see Finns. If Finland joins NATO, they would see enemies. Obviously, they're not going to like this, but I was at an event last week, a number of Nordic nations represented, and this woman from Finland was like, look, we used to be able to go look to the east and the west. We had good relations both ways. Now we're just going to look to the west. What is going to be the residual impact on Russia long term, do you think?
Well, I don't blame the Finns for reassessing, because while they've tried to make almost a principle of neutrality in their history, they've been attacked by the Soviets before in 1939. And to the extent they feel that Vladimir Putin resembles Joseph Stalin, I couldn't blame them in the least for wanting to join the Western Alliance. But you're right, it's regrettable. It's one more manifestation of this war that has terrible consequences. I mean, as much as I feel bad for Finland, I feel much worse for coming back to the developing world in the global south, where food prices are going up astronomically because so much of the harvest in Ukraine as well as Russia is going to be impeded from reaching the global market in the coming weeks and months. Winter wheat, crops like that. And so Finland's just one example. There are all sorts of ripple effects of this crisis, and they go well beyond Europe.